we have the program, the program start the program very soon. And just I want to a little bit this masjid we are planning to build the masjid, inshallah. You will see on the picture the new masjid. So we're using the money for the construction, but this is not updated. We are raising on $6,000 for the construction. So inshallah, just make dua and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it easy for us to build this masjid. So if any of you willing to do or donate to the masjid, so please do it, inshallah. And I ask Brother Farooq. So Brother Farooq is coordinator for all the program right here. He's the head of the programming for the MCCL. Inshallah, he's going to introduce the doctor.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. So I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight, and also Dr. Kia for making time and coming out to share his knowledge on this topic. So real quickly, before we begin the introduction and all that, this program is being brought to you by the Greater Good and with partnering with MCCL, the Muslim Community Center of Leesburg. And Greater Good quickly is a local Islamic organization. We do 4 different types of programs, educational programs such as this. We do dawah programs for non-Muslims. We do youth programs and social service programs. So you can find out more about us on online, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, greatergood.org. So that's about our organization, and I thank MCCL and Brother Basir for helping us put this program together and being cooperative in that, inshallah. Jazakallah khair, thank you so much. So quickly about this program, the main motivation for this program was because has everyone heard of a program on Netflix that's about to be aired called Messiah? Yeah? Everyone heard that, right? So this was the main motivation of why we wanted to do this program. If you've seen this trailer about what they're calling the Messiah, there's it seems like they're borrowing a lot of information from Islam, Christianity, Judaism, etc., and not really sure what they're kind of portraying. So we wanted to have a program catered to the community, the Muslim community, and especially the youngsters, the youth, to give them a good idea of what we as Muslims believe about Eesa ibn Maryam, his second coming, about the Dajjal, the Antichrist, and so on. So this is what the program is about, and also a quick show of hands. How did you guys hear about it? Was it email, Instagram, Facebook, all the youth? Instagram, Facebook. I think it was probably word of mouth. Our marketing guy wanted me past that, but anyway. So quickly, a little bit about Dr. Kia. He studied here in America and overseas in Egypt and Syria. He did his Hifz and Ijaza in Arabic language with multiple scholars from Al-Azhar. He's a regular khatib and travels to give lectures and seminars in various communities across America. He's a radiologist by profession and a former personal trainer and college basketball player. So without further ado, we'll turn it over to Dr. Kia.
Jazakallah khair.
And the last, inshallah, when you're coming out, because all the college very close to park each other. So just be careful, because right now we don't have a light anything outside. So be careful, don't go each other, inshallah.
Should I put this one on too?
Yeah.
Good thing my beard's not that long. Okay. Bismillah walhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Can everyone hear me? Yeah? Okay. نحمده سبحانه وتعالى ونستعينه ونستغفره. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Yeah, feel free to sit wherever. So as Brother Farooq was saying, I think especially not just with Netflix and whatnot, but, it's that time of year, right? Christmas and a lot of talk about Jesus, a lot of kind of a lot of discussion about this very, very significant person in our religion. And one of the things that we often say at the very end of our prayer is that we seek refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala min fitnati masihi dajjal, right? From the fitna, the trials and tribulations of the false or the trickery kind of like Messiah. What does that mean? Like, have you ever thought about what that really means? And what did Islam really teach us about that? think really in order to really appreciate this, and I don't know, how much time do I have? Like half an hour or 45 minutes? What? Okay, all right. I think what we need to do, like a prequel and a sequel, okay? So, or kind of like a part one and a part two, all right? And the prequel kind of needs to be the life of Jesus, right? His first coming, okay? Because you really need to understand that to understand the sequel, right? Which is his next coming, okay? Or part two, all of which really is about understanding the term Masih, right? Or Messiah, right? And I know a lot of times as Muslims, we just kind of, we hear that, but we don't really know or appreciate what exactly that means. Most of this talk is going to be about kind of bringing that term into some kind of significant meaning for us, right? So that's what we'll do. We'll take about 20 minutes and we'll talk about Eesa and the prequel, all right? And then we'll take another 20, 25 minutes and talk about the sequel, which is the Dajjal and the second coming of Eesa. And I think that way, there isn't like a lot of holes or Swiss cheese in how we kind of understand this, this narrative. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions Isa alayhi salam in the Quran multiple times, right? And much more than Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. He's a very, very central figure in the Quran. And to really appreciate him and to know him, you kind of, just like when we talk about Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, we talk about his society, what Arabian society was like in the 7th century, right? What the culture was like, what the political powers were like and whatnot. To appreciate Isa, you need to kind of do the same thing. And we'll do the same thing when we get to Masih Dajjal as well, right? We're going to talk about the world as it's going to be at that time, right? To appreciate the context. And the context is that you have a Jewish community, right? That lives in the area of Palestine, Jerusalem, right? Who is under the kind of control of the Roman government, right? After a couple hundred years, the temple was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar in the 5th century BCE. And, you know, they rebuilt the temple. They're trying to kind of have a life for themselves, but they're not autonomous, right? And they're under this kind of pagan government, right? And so there's a lot of angst and there's a lot of, you know, they hear, like, if you're a Jew at that time, you hear a lot of talk, like on the street, about a person who's supposed to be coming, a Messiah, right? Who's supposed to free us from this Roman government, like the shackles of this polytheistic government. And Rome would do things all the time. They, you know, for the most part, they would leave the Jews alone, right? But a lot of times they would force the priests to pay homage. They would do things that would desecrate the temple. You know, they would force certain taxes on them that they saw as unholy. They didn't really have, the Jews at that time didn't really have, you know, an independence, if you will, to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as they saw fit, right? And at the same time, right, there's all this talk about a savior that's coming. So a lot of what happened during this time, okay, you had a lot of false messiahs emerging. People who were claiming that they were going to be the Messiah. People who were trying to lead revolts, right? You ever heard of the term Sicarii, right? You know, or Maccabees or something like that, right? There were groups and factions that were developing, that were taking a very militant type culture to kind of take on the Roman government, do assassinations and stuff like that, right? Almost like terrorist-like behavior, right? This was the society that Jesus is about to be born into, right? So it was a very, very tense society that he was about to be born into, right? That was on the political side, okay? Then you had the religious side. And on the religious side, the Jews rebuilt their temple. So Sulaiman alayhi salam built the original temple, right, in Jerusalem for the Bani Israel. But this was destroyed and they rebuilt this temple. And now in this temple, there's a lot of corruption. You have all of these different quote unquote ulama of the Jews, right? And they're all kind of mixed up in their own thing, but it's all for profit. You have the Sadducees, and they're all about like the rituals of the temple, how to do the slaughter, how to do the blood, right? And they make a lot of money doing this, right? They charge people, you have to change your coins because you can't use the filthy polytheistic Roman coins that have pictures of God on them. So you have to pay a lot of money to change out your coins to have stuff, to be able to do stuff in the temple. You have the Pharisees, and they're all concerned about the fiqh and, all the kind of like the dry do's and don'ts. And there's hundreds and hundreds of laws, and they're caught up in that. And you have the Essenes, and they're caught up in their Gnostic practices and stuff like that. It's all just kind of fractioned, right? Nothing is really working harmonious, and there's a lot of corruption in the temple, right? So that's the religious side. So what kind of society is Jesus born into, right? Born into a society that's very similar to the one the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was born into, in the sense that there was a lot of religious corruption, right? And there's a lot of mixed up political corruption as well, right? And so he's going to be born into this society. Now, we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about the birth story, right? Or about Maryam, because the focus of our talk is going to be about the Dajjal. So, but we do need to talk about, after Eesa alayhi salam is born, we do need to talk about what he was there to do. Because in order to do that, that's what's going to help us understand what the term Messiah really means. So what does that term mean, first and foremost? What does the term Masih actually mean, right? Some ulama have thought that it comes from Masaha, which in the Arabic language means what? Okay, someone said anoint. What does someone else say? To wipe or to touch, right? It could also mean to traverse, like to walk through the earth. It could also mean to abolish, right? Masaha has all of these potential meanings in its roots. So some ulama, they said Masih, it means the one who traverses the earth and abolishes the false practices. Like Isa was going from town to town, right, in Palestine, and he was teaching people, abolishing bad practices, especially the stuff that was going on in the temple. Some of them says it means to wipe, because Isa alayhi salam, when he would touch people, he would heal them. And that's what it means to be Masih, right? But the most significant meaning is really what it meant to the Jews. Messiah meant someone who had two things. He had religious prowess and he had political prowess. He had mulk, and he had political power, right? But he also had hikmah. He had religious power, and he was a prophet. These two things combined was what Bani Israel was looking for in their Messiah. And the way that they would demonstrate this traditionally is they would take their king, who was also their prophet, and they would anoint them with oil. And this is initially what happened with Dawood. Dawood was essentially the first Messiah. David, for the Jews, was essentially the first Messiah. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, when Dawood killed Jalut, وَقَتَلَ دَاوُودَ الْجَالُوتِ وَأَتَاهُ اللَّهُ what? Two things, mulk and hikmah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave Dawood mulk, which is political power, and he gave him hikmah, right? Which is like the religious wisdom, right? And Dawood eventually brought Bani Israel out of their bondage at that time. And that was the original kind of like Messiah, right? And he was anointed with oil, and that was how they demonstrated this. So for the Bani Israel, this is now hundreds of years later, at the time when Jesus is born, they're waiting for another like Dawood, if you will. Someone else that they could anoint with oil representatively and say, this person's going to deliver us religiously and politically. You all with me, right? So that's what they were looking for. So Jesus is born into this environment. That's what it means to be Messiah. The roles of Jesus are a couple when he's here on earth, the prequel, if you will, right? One, Inni Rasulullahi ilaykum. I am a messenger to you. He tells Bani Israel, I am a messenger to you specifically, right? This is part of the religious part of being Messiah, okay? So, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran about our Prophet Muhammad, قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا النَّاسِ إِنِّي رَسُولُ اللَّهِ إِلَيْكُمْ جَمِيعًا. Tell, O you people, I am the messenger to all of you. This is the Prophet Muhammad. I am the messenger to every single one of you, okay? But Jesus alayhi salam is only sent to the Jews. He's only sent to Bani Israel. And he is very much himself Jewish, embodied within the law. Now, spiritually, he's Muslim. All the prophets are Muslim, right? You know what I mean by that, okay? but his identity is very, very much Jewish, okay? And he's born in this community, and he's sent for this community, to this community, to rectify them. In Matthew, in the New Testament, it says that Jesus says that I was sent only to the lost sheep. Lost sheep. What are lost sheep? They're dal. They need guidance. They need a shepherd. All the prophets are shepherds, essentially, right? I was sent to the lost sheep of Bani Israel. And in order to prove to them that he really is their Messiah, he really is their prophet, Allah gives him a series of signs. What are these signs? One, Jesus has the ability to take clay, like some of this like clay putties that you have, right? And just mold it into a bird, breathe into it, and all of a sudden, it's a live bird by the permission of Allah. أَنِّي أَخْلُقُ لَكُم مِّنَ الطِّينِ كَهَيْئَةِ الطَّيْرِ فَأَنفُخُ فِيهِ فَيَكُونُ طَيْرًا بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. Right? I take clay, I mold it in the form of a bird, and I simply breathe into it by the permission of Allah. He can't do anything on his own. By the permission of Allah, and this becomes a bird and it flies away. Alive, fully alive, right? And وَأُبْرِئُ الْأَكْمَهَ وَالْأَبْرَصَ وَأُحْيَ الْمَوْتَ بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. And I heal the blind, and I heal the leper, and I give life to the dead, all by the leave of Allah. Let's take a look at those signs for a moment, because I find them very, very interesting, right? Eesa alayhi salam is being sent to a community that is essentially spiritually dead. Spiritually, this community is dead. Like Imam Ali says, radiallahu, النَّاسُ النِّئَامُ وَإِذَا مَاتُوا انْتَبَأُوا, right? People are sleeping, and when they die, they finally wake up, right? Essentially, like we're a bunch of walking zombies. Like that's how Bani Israel was, like walking zombies. Physically, they're alive, but spiritually, they're dead. The role of Jesus wants to revive them spiritually, right? So when you look at these signs, look at the metaphor that these signs have behind them, right? To take lifeless clay and to breathe into it, all of a sudden it's a bird. That's essentially a metaphor for what he's doing to their hearts. Their hearts are dead. He's breathing the real Sharia into their hearts, the Sharia of Musa alayhi salam, and they're coming to life, right? Vis-a-vis that, right? And when you look at the sign that he heals the blind, again, this has a profound metaphorical component to it, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says on the day of judgment, people are going to be blind, right? And they're going to say, oh Allah, لِمَا حَشَرْتَنِي أَعْمَى وَقَدْ كُنْتُ بَصِيرًا. Why did you raise me blind and I could see? And Allah would say, well, you were blind in this life, right? So people can be blind in this life. So when Jesus takes the blind person and he touches them and he gives them life, it's a metaphor for what he's doing, his message. He's giving people the ability to see. He's taking the blind, spiritually blind, and he's giving them the ability to see. The leper, anyone here seen a leper before? You ever seen what does a leper look like? What does it look like?
Very long, bushy tail.
No. Leprosy. No, the disease, leprosy. Anyone seen like a Google picture? How the face boils over, you get pus coming out, it's hideous, there's transformation, there's deformation, there's skin declination, it looks very, very hideous, right? What is that? You think that's just a random thing that he was doing? This sign is just a random sign? No. When you commit sins, this is essentially what it does to you. If you could see the spiritual realm, this is what it looks like. This is what fisk looks like. This is what sins look. It looks like a leper, right? And Jesus alayhi salam is teaching them what true tawbah is, to have true forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's like he's healing that deformity, right? And finally, he just flat out says, وَأُحْيَ الْمَوْتَ بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. I revived the dead by the permission of Allah. He's the only prophet to have this ability to revive the dead by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Why? Because again, it's an ishara. It's a broader allegorical reference to his bigger mission of what he's there to do, which is revive Bani Israel spiritually, right? Give them life. They're like spiritually, they're like dead, right? And he's there to give them life, right? ثُمَّ قَسَتْ قُلُوبُكُم مِّن بَعْدِ ذَلِكَ فَهِيَ كَالْحِجَارَةِ أَوْ أَشَدَّ قَسْوَةً. Allah says about Bani Israel in Surah Baqarah, your hearts became so hard they became like rocks, but even harder than rocks, right? Because some rocks, if you hit them hard enough, water flows out, right? Some rocks sink just by the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and their hearts were like rocks. And that's what Isa came to soften that, right? So Rasulan ila Bani Israel, that was one of his missions, okay? Also, as a part of his mission is to bring them wisdom, is to bring them tibyan, clarification for all of their distance. وَجِئْتُكُمْ بِالْحِكْمَةِ. This is what he says in the Quran. وَجِئْتُكُمْ بِالْحِكْمَةِ وَلِأُبَيِّنَ لَكُمْ بَعْضَ الَّذِي تَخْتَلِفُونَ فِيهِ. I've come to you with wisdom, right? And to clarify a lot of the things that you've differed on. What does this mean? Well, for one, Jesus was not just a messenger. He was a murabbi. He was a sheikh. He was a teacher, right? He was someone he had disciples and he was causing them to grow from a spiritual perspective, right? So that wisdom is what that is. A lot of this wisdom, the teachings of Jesus, it's compiled in what are called apocryphal works, okay? They're not in the New Testament as we see them today, but in things like the proto-gospel of James, the infancy gospel of Thomas. A lot of these books didn't make it into the New Testament in 325 in the Nicene Creed. But they talk a lot about the teachings of Jesus. So for example, the wisdom, like one time Jesus was asked, how did you become so wise? And he said, I looked at the ignorance of how ignorant people act, and I realized how not to act. Right? I just looked at how ignorant people act, and I realized how not to act. Right? Another time, Imam Ghazali compiles these in his Ihya Ulumuddin. He says, "Oh people, oh students, like empty your stomachs so your hearts can be vassals of the divine." Right? Empty your stomachs so your hearts can become vassals of the divine. And he has so many teachings like that. This is his wisdom, right? He has so many teachings about the dunya and the transient nature of the dunya. Jesus was a true aesthetic, right? He didn't care about the dunya at all. He didn't care about it at all. He couldn't be corrupted one bit, right? وَلِيُبَيِّنَ لَكُمْ بَعْضَ الَّذِي تَخْتَلِفُونَ فِيهِ. Tibyan. We said that in the temple, there was all kinds of ikhtilaf, right? In their place of worship, there was all kinds of, the Sadducees and the Pharisees and the Essenes, they were all doing their own thing. Jesus came and brought it all together. Holistically, he came and said, this is all one big religion. This is all, and it also has a spiritual component. And they were so embellished in just the ritual component, they didn't see the deeper spiritual parts. So he also came, as the Quran says, this is all part of the prequel. We're almost done with the prequel, okay? We're going to get to the sequel, all right? He also came, مُصَدِّقًا لِمَا بَيْنَ يَدَيَّ مِنَ التَّوْرَاتِ, right? This is important, he says. I have come to confirm what is in the Torah, the book that was given to Moses alayhi salam, right? Now, Jesus didn't come with a new religion. He says this over and over again in the Quran. I haven't come with anything new. I've come to confirm what Moses brought, right? What happened though after the life of Jesus? After the life of Jesus, you had a man by the name of Paul. Anyone heard of this person? Paul. Paul never met Jesus. Paul never studied with Jesus. Jesus had Sahaba. Jesus had companions. He had disciples. These people wrote about him. These people, they had their own established kind of like temple in Jerusalem, which was headed by James. Anyone heard of a man by the name of James? This person is very, very important. James is said to be the brother of Jesus. Now, whether that's majazi, okay, metaphorical, or real, if you say that Maryam alayhi salam took a husband after the birth of Jesus, nothing wrong with saying that. After the birth of Jesus, nothing wrong with saying that. Whether it's real, his real brother, or his metaphorical brother, James actually has a very, very small epistle in the New Testament. It's towards the very end. And when you read that, you see it's very, very similar to the Sharia of Islam. Very, very similar to the message of nothing in there about the divinity of Jesus, right? And James and all of the Sahaba of Jesus, right? They were all on the same page. And it was all just to confirm and allow for islah of what Moses brought, right? But this man, Paul, started doing something different. He left that temple in Jerusalem. He started going to Greece. And he started going to Turkey. What is modern? He started sending them letters. And in these letters, he wasn't telling them about the teachings of Jesus. He wasn't He was saying, I had a different vision. I had a different vision of Jesus, and Jesus, in fact, is divine. He's the Son of God. He died for your sins, right? This is what he's telling all these people. And in a polytheistic society like Greece, right, where they already had many trinities that they were already a part of, this was very easy. It caught fire. It basically caught fire, right? But Paul teaches something totally different from Jesus. Paul, instead of confirming what's in the Torah, he basically says, you don't need what's in the Torah. All you need is love. Wait, that sounds like... He said, all you need is love, okay? All you need to do is love Jesus and just trust that he died for your sins, okay? And from here, this message, مُصَدِّقًا لِمَا بَيْنَ يَدَيْهِ, this prophetic role of Jesus as a part of him being a Messiah, very, very early on, after Jesus was taken, it started to be changed. And Pauline Christianity started to form. Whereas Jesus' original message, right, which was very, very Islamic, it started to be changed, right? The last message, or the last function of Jesus alayhi salam, right, in this prequel, if you will, we're still in the prequel, okay, was وَمُبَشِّرًا بِرَسُولِ يَأْتِي مِن بَعْدِ اسْمُهُ أَحْمَدَ. I'm here, Jesus tells his people, I'm going to tell you about a man who's going to come after me. His name is Ahmad. This is what the Quran records. Jesus telling his community that a man by the name of Ahmad is going to come after me. He doesn't say when, but he says this man is going to come after me, right? And Ahmad is just another name for Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? And so a lot of scholars, Muslim scholars, have looked to the Torah because he's مُصَدِّقًا لِمَا بَيْنَ يَدَيْهِ مِنَ التَّوْرَةِ. He's confirming what's in the Torah. So what is in the Torah that he's confirming about the coming of Muhammad? There's a few interesting verses. Actually, there's many interesting verses, but just for the sake of time, I'll mention 3 or 4, right? A lot of these verses, it's like, wait a minute, this can't be anyone but Muhammad. In chapter 29 of Isaiah, which is a book in the Old Testament about prophecies, chapter 29, I think verse number 11, if I'm not mistaken, 11 through 19, it starts to talk about how the book is delivered to one who is not learned. He doesn't know how to read and he doesn't know how to write. And it will be said to him, Qara. This is the Hebrew that's used. Qara, right? Which sounds very much like Iqra, right? And this man will say, I am not learned. Which is what? Ma ana biqari, right? This is in Isaiah. What does that sound like? That sounds exactly like Muhammad's reception of the revelation in Mount Hira, right? And this is in the Old Testament. This is exactly the prophecy of a man who's going to receive revelation. The man is unlearned, and revelation will come to him saying, read, and this man is going to say exactly these words, Ma ana biqari, I cannot read. Who is this in reference to, right? In Isaiah chapter 11, the first couple of verses of chapter 11, it says that a rod will stem forth from Jesse, okay? And it will fill the earth. It will fill the earth with the praise of God, okay? Jesse, according to the dictionary of the Bible, is a contraction of Ismail. Ismail is the forefather of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Who, the rod coming forth, that means like a powerful symbol coming forth. Who from the progeny of Ismail is significant other than Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? No one. Who is this in reference to? In Habakkuk chapter 3, verse 3, another book of the Old Testament, right? Chapter 3, verse 3. It says, God will come from Tamam, the Holy One from Mount Paran, and the entire world will be filled with his praise. What do these terms mean? God will come from Tamam. Tamam, if you look at the J. Hastings Dictionary of the Bible, Tamam is an oasis in Medina. Yes, the Old Testament geographically references Medina as God coming from this place. Again, it's majaz, it's a metaphor. It's a metaphor, of course, not literally, right? And the Holy One from Mount Paran. What is Mount says Mount Paran are the mountains on the outskirts of Mecca, right? So the Holy One's coming from Mecca, and God's glory is coming from Medina. What is this? Rasulullah made hijrah from Mecca to Medina, and Islam spread from Medina, right? The whole world was filled with His praise, right? So when Isa alayhi salam says, مُصَدِّقًا لِمَا بَيْنَ يَدَيَّ مِنَ التَّوْرَةِ, I'm confirming and affirming what's in the Torah. There's many more. We just don't have time. There's many references that to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam as the coming of the next prophet, right? Now, this is all a part of His role as the Messiah. This is the religious role. But wait a minute, there's a political role too, right? That's what the Messiah is supposed to do. The Messiah is supposed to deliver them not just religiously, but He's supposed to deliver them politically as well, right? So what happens? Well, Isa has some enemies. The problem is, he's telling all of these corrupt rabbis in the temple, all your practices are corrupt, right? You're all being hypocritical. You're charging people interest. You're causing people to go broke. You're simply caught up with the rituals. You don't understand the deeper meanings, right? The rabbis want to get rid of him. At the same time, he's calling himself Masih, and the Roman government's not stupid. They know that Masih means king. It means king, right? So to the Roman government, he's a threat too. In the Middle East today, if you call yourself president of the chess club, the government's coming after you, okay? Just call yourself president of the chess club. It's over, okay? You're a threat. This man's calling himself a king, okay? So the Roman government wants to get rid of him. So these two get together. Bani Israel and the Roman government get together, right? And they want to get rid of him. The ulama of the temple and Pontius Pilate, right? They're like, how are we going to get rid of him? And Isa can detect this. And in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala captures this sentiment. He says, فَلَمَّا أَحَسَّ عِيسَى مِنْهُمُ الْكُفْرِ. When Jesus alayhi salam detected, hassa from hissa, it's like your sense, your detection. When Jesus detected disbelief from the community, you know what He says? He says, who's going to help me? Because He knows it's about to go down. It's about to go down. He says, Man ansari ilallah. Who's going to be my helper in the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? قَالَ الْحَوَارِيُّ نَحْنُ أَنصَارُ اللَّهِ. Right? And the Hawariyun eventually say, we are the helpers of Allah. But he could detect this. And so they attempt to kill him. Now here's what's important, right? If he's going to be the true Messiah, he's got to fulfill this political role somehow of deliverance, right? But now they're out to kill him, right? So how's this going to happen? This is going to carry over now into the sequel, okay? But the rest of the story here in the prequel is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَا قَتَلُوهُ وَمَا صَلَبُوهُ وَلَكِنْ شُبِّهَ لَهُمْ. They didn't kill him, they didn't crucify him, but it was made to seem so. What does that mean? What does that mean, it was made to seem so? Okay? The ulama have different opinions. One is that someone was made to look like Jesus. Someone was made to look like him. Was it Judas Iscariot? Was it who was it? Someone who betrayed him or something like that. And they thought they had killed Jesus, right? But they didn't really kill him. Now, a lot of other scholars like Fakhruddin al-Razi and even the more contemporary Muhammad Asad, like, wait a minute. Hold up. You mean to tell me that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just allowed someone else to die and everyone else just thought that they killed Jesus? We don't feel like that really makes sense, okay? So there's a group of ulama that says that's what happened. There's another subgroup that says, wait a minute, there's got to be another explanation. Maybe this Paul thing has something to do with this. Maybe over time, because of the message of Paul and because of Paul's preaching about the crucifixion, how that's central to Jesus becoming God or to becoming Son of God or something like that, over years and years, it was started to made seem to the collective memory of the community in Rome and Greece that Jesus was actually killed on the cross, right? Because over time, like there's nothing's recorded in any good measure, like nothing, there's no video cameras, there's no, there's nothing is on Facebook or Twitter, you can't capture something like, oh, there it is, right? No, it's just what people say. And you ever play telephone, right? Like, by the time it gets to the last person, it's totally different, okay? So these stories just kind of get passed on over time, and it changed, and it was made to seem so. Another group of ulama kind of took that opinion. But what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, but رَفَعَ اللَّهُ إِلَيْهِ, Allah raised him to himself. And in another verse, he says, إِنِّي مُتَوَفِّيكَ وَرَافِعُكَ إِلَيْهِ وَمُطَهِّرُكَ مِنَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. Oh, he tells Jesus, I'm about to take your soul, right? And I'm about to raise you up. And I'm about to purify you or absolve you from those people who disbelieved in you, right? And then he says this, وَجَعِلُ الَّذِينَ اتَّبَعُوكَ فَوْقَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا إِلَى يَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ. And here's the transition to the sequel, okay? Allah says, I'm going to make the people who follow you superior and victorious. Not the people who worship you, the people who follow you, okay? And ittiba'u rasul is essentially what's important here, okay? So, and so now we'll go to the sequel, okay? So this is the prequel. This is the life of Jesus. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala essentially took him, right, from this earth, the same way that he brought him into this earth. When Allah brought him into this earth, he said, be and he was. And when he wanted to take him from this earth, he simply took him and that was it, right? So this is kind of the summary of the prequel of the story of Jesus as it pertains in the Quran. There's obviously nothing here about Christmas, okay? This is essentially a pagan Roman holiday mixed in with some Christian themes. And, a lot of people talk about nowadays, is it okay to say Merry Christmas? Jesus wasn't even born on that day. Most scholars of the Bible say Jesus was probably born sometime around August. If you look at the depictions of how the birth is described in the Bible, he wasn't even born that day. It's mixed in with polytheistic kind of Roman holidays at that time. And it's got nothing to do with us as Muslims, right? This is all about a celebratory of mixture of Pauline theology. And, some are like, well, we just kind of want to fit in. Well, Jesus didn't fit in. Look, did Jesus fit in? The rabbis hated him. The Jewish community hated him. The Roman government hated him. Rasulullah ﷺ says, give glad tidings to the stranger, right? Jesus was a stranger in his own community. He never fit in. How are you going to celebrate Jesus by trying to fit in, right? Doesn't make any sense, right? If you want to celebrate Jesus, stop trying to fit in and start being sincere, because that's what he was, right? Truly sincere, okay? Now, Jesus is no longer on the scene, okay? And we're going to fast forward many, many years, all right? How many years? We don't know, but many years, okay? All right, it's been at least 2019 years, okay? And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam teaches us that he's gonna come back. And the context in which he's gonna come back is very dramatic. The world at that time is not gonna be something that you would recognize today, okay? There's gonna be massive hunger. There's gonna be all kinds of wars. There's gonna be all kinds of instability, okay? Things that you take for granted nowadays just isn't gonna be there, okay? And so at that time, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam tells us about a man that's going to emerge by the name of Al-Dajjal, all right? Now, the ahadith that deal with this subject are plentiful. There's over 45 companions, 45 companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that have narrated hadith about Ad-Dajjal. If we're going to talk about all the hadith, we will be here till Fajr, okay? So what I have done is I've kind of taken a sample of a lot of these ahadith, especially the ones that tend to capture the scenery more than anything else, okay? And when you look at all of these ahadith, all right, they're in 4 general categories about the Dajjal. One is his physical characteristics. There's a lot of ahadith that talk about how to recognize him, okay? The other is geographical characteristics. Where does he come from? Where does he go? How does he get there? Where can't he go? Okay? Things that protect you as a Muslim. There are some ahadith that talk about that, right? And ultimately, there are a few very, very long ahadith that kind of bring it all together, and then at the end talk about how he's killed. And we're going to pick 2 of those very long hadith. 2 of them. We can't talk about all of them. We'll be here till Fajr, okay? And then the other ones we're going to kind of pick and choose, okay? So we know that this man, Al-Dajjal. First of all, what does Dajjal mean? Someone tell me, does anyone know what Dajjala in the Arabic language means? What does it mean? Deception, exactly. Trickery, deception, right? That's his mission, right? That's his mission. Trickery and deception. That's all he's going to do. And all of these ahadith, okay, are going to pertain to that one way or another. But the first set of ahadith, all right, deal with him in terms of his physical characteristics, all right? So there's about 9 or 10 that are spread out over several ahadith. 9 or 10 physical characteristics that are spread out over multiple ahadith. أَنَّهُ رَجُلٌ شَابٌ. Okay? He's a young man. When he emerges as a Dajjal, he will be a young man. He won't be old. He won't be a toddler. He won't be an infant, okay? He's not gonna talk in his cradle like Jesus did, alayhi salam, right? He's gonna be a shab, a young man, okay? Ahmar, he's gonna be from red, but essentially what it means he's from the east, okay? Qasir, he's gonna be short. Start to pay attention to some of these characteristics, okay? Because a lot of these characteristics now, they're not necessarily ideal characteristics, okay? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course, is not imperfect in the least bit. He's going to claim that he's God. So he's short, right? Afhaj. Afhaj is when your feet are bowed. So like Jahed Verum or like Blount's disease. You ever seen a child whose his hips kind of come out like that? Knees come out like that, and then they come back in, and you got this waddle walk, right? People who have vitamin D deficiency, rickets, people can get that like that, right? And so he kind of has that. He might, maybe, Allahu Alam, maybe he's born with a vitamin D deficiency or something like that. He's a human being, just like any other human being, okay? Nothing else special about him, right? So he has these, so he's got this kind of like Jahed Verum associated with him, which is this like, this little waddle. Okay, a little bit of a wide bowed leg, a bowed leg. Ja'd al-ras, he's got curly hair. Okay, Ajd al-jibha, he's got a broad forehead. Arid al-nahar, and a broad chest. So he's short, curly hair. Okay, he's got a big forehead. Okay, and he's got a big chest. So he's kind of like. And he's got a little bit of a waddle, whatever. You know, it's like his feet are kind of bowls like that. Not ideal, right? not if you're playing a video game, these aren't like you know how you pick your physical characteristics. This isn't what you would pick in the very beginning for your superstar or whatever, like your soldier, okay? And then وهذه ممسوح العين اليمنى. His right eye, now other ahadith talk about left eye, but there's more ahadith that talk about the right eye. Okay, so there's some differences about right eye or left eye. His right eye is mamsuh, essentially is out for the count. Okay, it's gone. Okay. In another hadith, it says that it's floating like a grape. His eye is floating like a grape. So he's got some kind of like retinal detachment or something like that. Okay. And so, وَمِن صِفَاتِهِ أَنَّهُ عَقِيمٌ لَا يُولَدُ لَهُ. All right, he doesn't get to have kids. There's something wrong from a biological point of view as well. Okay, so you know, ajib, maybe there's chromosomally something going on because there seems like there's a pattern that's emerging here. Allahu Alam, you know. The Rasulullah says this is the description. There's some like things that come to my mind as a doctor, but you know, here's some specific ahadith. Inna Allah laysa bi'awar. ألا إن المسيح الدجال أعور العين اليمنى كأن عينه عنبة طافية. Right? Your Lord is not one-eyed. And the Dajjal, Masih al-Dajjal, he's one-eyed and the eye that's out looks like a floating grape. Okay? It looks like a floating grape. وفي الحديث أنس رضي الله عنه قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم ما بعث نبي إلا أنذر أمته الأعور الكذاب أَلَا إِنَّهُ الْأَعْوَرُ وَإِنَّ رَبَّكُمْ لَيْسَ بِأَعْوَرٍ. There's not been a single prophet, the Prophet Muhammad says, except that he has warned his community about the one-eyed liar. And your Lord is not one-eyed. وَإِنَّ بَيْنَ عَيْنَيْهِ مَكْتُوبٌ كَافِرٌ. And between his eyes is written the words kafir. The words kafir. In one hadith, it says kafir. In another hadith, maktubun bayna aynay ka-fa-ra, the triliteral root, okay? Ka-fa-ra. Now here's what's interesting. This is really interesting. يَقْرَأُهُ كُلُّ مُؤْمِنٍ كَاتِبٍ وَغَيْرُ كَاتِبٍ. Every believer will be able to read it whether they're literate or not literate. Now how's that? How's that? This whole thing about the end times, okay? And by the way, the coming of Jesus and the emergence of Masih al-Dajjal, it's from the alamat al-kubra. This is from the 10 greater signs of the Day of Judgment, okay? So this is from the greater signs of the Day of Judgment, right? And what's happening here from an eschatological point of view is this isn't just about who has the greatest physical prowess or all the weapons or something like that. This is about iman, right? And your physical eye has basar, right? Which is how you see physically. But your heart has basira, which is how you perceive things spiritually. And it's almost as if because if you're not literate, your eye, it's like your eye can't read actual words. But if you have iman, your heart can perceive signs. And it's almost, if you ask me, that's almost what the hadith is indicating here, that the heart of a believer has iman. And because it has iman, it can perceive these things that people who don't have iman can't perceive. So these are the physical characteristics that we know. He's short, he's a young man, we know he comes from the east. In one hadith it says, he's going to come from Khurasan. Another hadith specifically, Isfahan. In another hadith, somewhere from Sham. He comes from the east, okay? We know he's short. We know he's got curly hair, okay? Broad forehead, written on there, kafir, okay? In the biblical tradition, it's something else. What is it? Right. It's 666, okay? So this is a difference, What are you saying? Like that movie they're taking from... No, the Netflix, like they're taking... Is it already out or it's not out? Oh, it's not out. So, okay. Oh, okay. I was curious how they portrayed him. Was it kafir or 666, right? So, so that's how it is in that tradition. And he's short, he's broad-chested, he's got a little bit of a waddle, he's one-eyed, okay? And he can't have kids. So these are the physical characteristics of the Dajjal. The next set of ahadith are all about geography, okay? This is how Rasulullah ﷺ describes him from a geographical point of view. We're almost done, like 15 more minutes, and then we'll get to the climax of the sequel, which is Jesus coming, okay? When we talk a little bit more about Dajjal, okay? And one of the companions that narrates a hadith here is Abu Bakr. And that makes sense because Abu Bakr was always interested in the geography of where people came from, right? In the genealogy of where people came from. So one of the hadith narrated by Abu Bakr is حدثنا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم الدجال يخرج من أرض بالمشرق يقال لها خراسان. Dajjal is going to come from an eastern part of the earth they would call Khurasan, which nowadays is kind of like Iran, Afghanistan, that kind of area. In another hadith narrated by Anas radiyallahu anhu, يخرج الدجال من يهودة أصبهان. من يهودة أصبهان. This is interesting, okay? معه 70,000 من اليهود عليهم الدجال. 70,000 Yahud are going to follow him. So the hadith says the Dajjal is going to emerge from Isfahan. That's actually a city in Iran, okay? And 70,000 Jews will be with him as he emerges, okay? Now, a couple things about this. Let's pause here for a moment because this is interesting. From a historical point of view and also it goes back to the prequel, okay? So historically speaking, Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, in the 5th century BCE, before Common Era, okay? What happened was a little boring history here, okay? After Suleiman, Assyrians came in and they took over the northern part of Israel, okay? And then they dominated for some time and they oppressed Bani Israel for some time. Then Babylonians came in and they took over the Assyrians. And then Bani Israel is like, all right, screw this. We're just going to have a revolt. So they revolted against Babylon and they got their butts kicked. And Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar is like, all right, that's it. End of this, we're destroying the temple, okay? And the temple that Suleiman had built, Nebuchadnezzar just razed to the ground, completely razed to the ground, right? And the Ark of the Covenant was in there as well, which was the most holy thing that Bani Israel had, okay? When this happened, Bani Israel went into a diaspora, okay? They had to leave their land of with Palestine, right? They had to leave, okay? When they left, most of them took refuge in what is now currently Iran, a lot of them in the city of Isfahan, right? Because the king of Persia at that time was tolerant towards them, okay? And this is even recorded in the Bible, right? He hosted them, he took them in, and a lot of them built a foundation in that city. Even till this day, there's a strong Jewish community in Isfahan. Strong Jewish community in Isfahan. They're proudly Persian and they're proudly Jewish, right? To the extent that the Israeli government offered them thousands of dollars to migrate to Israel and to leave, and they decided to stay, right? So they've been there for a while. And there's a specific reference now that they're gonna be the ones who initially support him and come out. The other thing is that Dajjal is gonna make a claim. What's the claim that he's gonna make? He's the Messiah. That's why we say Messiah Dajjal. Dajjal, like the treacherous Dajjal. He's gonna tell, his initial da'wah is not gonna be to people in general. His initial da'wah is gonna be to Bani Israel. He's going to say, I'm your Messiah that you've been waiting for. Because till this day, the Jewish community, because they didn't accept Jesus, they're still waiting for their Messiah. They're still waiting, right? They saw Jesus as a false prophet, right? And they're like, well, you saw he wasn't successful on the political front. Messiah has to be successful on the political and religious front, so he wasn't our Messiah, right? But Allah has a plan for this. Allah has a plan for this, right? And so he's going to initially preach. So the initial community that's going to support the Dajjal is Bani Israel. And the initial people that's going to kind of fall for his trickery is Bani Israel, right? So, and then وَجَاءَ فِي الْحَدِيثِ أَبُو بَكْرَ السَّابِقِ يَتْبَعُهُ أَقْوَامٌ كَانَ وُجُوهُهُمْ الْمَجَّانُ الْمُتْرَقَةُ. The people that are going to follow him, like the actual the description of the people, their faces are going to be flattened, like as if you took a shield and you flattened out the shield. Like their face is going to have that kind of morphology. Like maybe their nose is flattened, or maybe, and this is why the ulama say the Arab are not going to be the people that follow Dajjal, right? Because they don't have this kind of like facial characteristic, right? It's going to be some other race, right? So those are the ahadith about his geography. And then the most important ahadith, like what is he able to do? What does the Dajjal do? How is it a fitna? Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam says he's going to travel through the earth in 40 days. Who knows this hadith? 40 days. One day is like what? One day is like 1 year. Another day is like what? 1 month. And another day is like 1 week. And the rest are like normal days. If you add that up, it's like 14 and a half months. Okay? If you take that literally. Okay? And there's no reason why we don't need to take it literally. So for 14 and a half months, he's going to traverse the earth, right? His speed, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is going to be like rain backed by wind. That's how fast he's going to travel. Rain backed by wind. You ever seen like on the Weather Channel, like in hurricane season, there's like Hurricane Alberta or Hurricane Mary or Hurricane this or that. And it's like somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean. And then like 4 days later, it's like on the coast of Florida, right? That's rain backed up by wind. That's how fast he's going to travel, essentially. Like one day it's the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, another day it's Florida, okay? So he doesn't need that much time to go throughout the entire earth. And he's going to go through the entire earth everywhere except Mecca and Medina. Let's read some of these ahadith, right? He's going to have ma'hu jannatun wa narun, fannaruhu janna wa jannatun naruhu. He's going to have a fire, like a hellfire, and he's going to have something that looks like paradise. Now, how is this? I'm not sure, right? Maybe he has some capacity to create some kind of virtual reality that looks like fire, that looks like hellfire, looks like paradise. Maybe he has the capacity to create the environment that feels like hellfire or paradise. He's got this ability to have something that looks like hell with him, something that looks like paradise. And Rasulullah ﷺ says, his hell actually is like paradise. His paradise actually is like hell, right? And he says in another hadith, مَعْهُ نَهْرَانِ يَجْرِيَانِ أَحَدُهُمَا رَأْيَ الْعَيْنِ مَاءٌ أَبْيَضٌ. He has like two rivers, right? One of them's like a white river. وَالْآخَرُ رَأْيُ الْعَيْنِ نَارٌ تَأَجَّجٌ. And another one like a flowing body of fire, like a river of fire. Okay, so he says, فَإِمَّا أَدْرَكَنَّ أَحَدٌ فَلْيَأْتِيَ النَّهَارَ الَّذِي يَرَاهُ نَارٌ. If one of you sees this, go to the... Now this is why it's such a fitna. Listen what the Prophet ﷺ says. Go to the river that looks like a fire. فَلْيُغَمِّدْ. Close your eyes. ثُمَّ لْيُطَأْتِ رَأْسَهُ. Lower your head, فَيَشْرَبْ مِنْهُ. Drink from that river of fire. Drink from that river of fire, فَإِنَّهُ مَاءٌ بَارِدٌ. You'll find it's cold water. This is why it's such a fitna. Like you have to literally, to survive, you have to abandon your trust in your senses. Like abandon your trust in your actual senses. This is why you seek refuge in every single prayer from the fitna of Masih al-Dajjal. Because who can do this? Like who has the capacity to be like, you know what? I'm just going to trust in the hadith of the Prophet and I'm going to forego my senses, right? That's hard. Like that's very difficult, right? In another hadith, he says, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, وَإِنَّ مِن فِتْنَتِهِ أَنْ يَقُولَ الْأَعْرَابِيُّ أَرَأَيْتَ إِنْ بَعَثْتُ لَكَ أَبَاكَ وَأُمَّكَ أَتَشْهَدُ أَنِّي رَبُّكَ. He's going to find a person, an Arabi, an Arabian, he's going to say, will you believe that I'm your Lord? Okay? If I bring your mom and dad back to life and they tell you to believe in me, right? His mom and dad are dead. And he says, will you believe in me if I do this? And the man's like, of course I'll believe in you. فَيَتَمَثَّلُ لَهُ الشَّيَاطَانِ شَيْطَانَانِ فِي سُورَةِ أَبَاهِ وَأُمِّهِ فَيَقُولَانِ يَا بُنَيْ اتَّبِعْهُ فَإِنَّهُ رَبَّكَ. Right? So two shaitans will come, and this is the other thing about Dajjal. Dajjal has control over jinn, and he also has control over shayateen. And shayateen have the capacity to transform, right? And they're like transformers. They can take multiple shapes and forms, okay? So he's going to say to two shaitan, one of you take the form of his dad, the other of you take the form of his mom. Go talk to him and tell him I'm his Lord, right? And they'll do that and he'll believe in it. So the other thing about Dajjal has the ability to control shayateen. He has the ability to control jinn and shayateen. Look at the resourcefulness of this person. Look at how much power this person has, right? So and he also has the ability to control the weather. He's going to say to the weather, rain, and it rains. He has the ability to control crops coming out of the ground. I have two hadith I want to read. I want to read them in English because they're long, right? In each one, I need like 3 minutes and we're close to the end, okay? So these ahadith, they kind of summarize a lot of what he does, but they're going to start to bring in the transition of Eesa alayhi salam as well, okay? The hadith goes, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he says, among his trials is that he commands the sky to rain and it does. He commands earth to grow and it does. Now imagine, like nowadays, the capacity and the technology that we have to know the weather is way more than it was even 10, 20 years ago. But in the future, some people think we're even going to have the capacity to control weather. To some extent, we may have the capacity to control weather, right? Think about that, like how realistic this could be. And he says he has the capacity to pass by a village and tell the grass to grow, and it does. Agribusiness nowadays, companies like Monsanto, right? They're getting smarter and smarter. They're getting more and more capable of growing crops and making animals like grow from birth to like adulthood in just a matter of days, right? By manipulating hormones, manipulating genetics, right? Doing all these different things. It's not ba'id. Like, this isn't hard to believe. And all that Dajjal is, he doesn't have any intrinsic super power. He has a few things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives him, right? But for the most part, he's just a magician. That's all he is. He's a magician, okay? So he's going to pass by a village. If they deny him, he's going to destroy the village. If they accept him, he's going to cause the rain to sky, the sky to rain for them, and he's going to cause their livestock to be fat. This is at a time, okay? People are hungry. Now imagine how difficult it is. Like a lot of us nowadays, okay? We're good. You're good. You don't go home hungry. You don't go to bed hungry. But what if you were hungry all the time? What if you had no food? What if there was a drought? There's no water. There's no food. Here comes a man, okay? Now you have kids. You have kids. Here comes a man, says, you need some food? I'll make it rain, right? You need some crops? I'll make them come out of the ground. I'll take care of you. I just want you to support me and believe in me, right? And accept that I'm your Lord, right? That's all you have to do, right? This is why it's fitna. This is why it's so difficult. You can't even imagine this because you've been comfortable your whole life. But that's not how it always is, right? And so for a community, for a group of people who's starving and desperate for someone to come and say, I'll cause these crops to come out of the ground, no problem. That's really going to have power over you. And unless you have iman, unless you truly have iman in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're going to succumb to this trick. No place on earth remains without being stepped on by him. And he's going to do it in 14 and a half months, basically, right? He moves like water backed up by wind, right? Except Mecca and Medina. And whenever he wants to enter these two cities, an angel with a sword prevents him, right? And the hadith goes on to say that the Prophet says that there are very few on that day, very few human beings. So something's going to happen to it. Is this status post World War III? Allahu A'lam, right? Is this some kind of like apocalypse or some sort, like Allahu A'lam? But there's very few people that day. The best of them is going to be in Jerusalem and is going to be their leader. Now this is a reference to the Mahdi, okay? And while their leader proceeds to lead the morning prayer, Jesus, the son of Mary, descends from heaven. The leader of the Muslims goes backwards in order to make space for Jesus. So Jesus descends. The Mahdi is leading the prayer. The Mahdi sees him come, right? And he starts to come back. He says, okay, you lead the prayer. And Jesus says, he puts his hand on his shoulder and says, go forward and lead the prayer. Now this is really significant. I want to pause here and talk about something, right? At this time, there are other ahadith that talk about wars that are going to be occurring. There's going to be a camp that is led by the Mahdi. Muslims fighting under the leadership of the Mahdi. Shia, Sunni, all Muslims are going to be united at this time. They're all going to be united. And this is the only force of good. And they're going to be fighting against the camps of the Dajjal. Sometimes they win, sometimes they lose. وَتِلْكَ الْأَيَّامُ نُدَوِّلُهَا بَيْنَ النَّاسِ. Allah says in the Quran, these are days like in war. Sometimes you win, sometimes you get a question.
Is there any hadith that Dajjal can detect if a person is lying and trying to trick him?
I'm not familiar with that.
Like they say they believe him, but really they know it's Dajjal, he's not.
No, I'm not familiar with any hadith like that. Yeah. Let's save our questions till the end, inshallah. We're almost done. Just 5 more minutes. We'll be done. Okay. And so there's wars. Okay. There's all kinds of wars, and in these wars, Muslims win some, they lose some. But for the most part, they never get the best of the Dajjal. They never get the best of his armies. Okay. And so they're in this period where they need a political leader. They need someone who will give them power from a political point of view. Now remember what we talked about. Jesus alayhi salam is Al-Masih, Al-Haq. And Al-Masih Al-Haq has to have two things. What? Hikmah and mulk. Right? Now the Bani Israel refused to believe in him. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even though they had their chance at guidance vis-a-vis his prophethood, which he fulfilled, right? Which he fulfilled. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala stripped them of their covenant with him when they rejected Jesus, and Jesus's completion of his role as a Messiah is now going to be with the next community who holds that covenant, which is the Muslim community, who he's going to come to fulfill that political part. So eventually, Eesa alayhi salam is going to fulfill what it means to be Al-Masih. But he's going to complete it with the Muslims, not with Bani Israel, because they rejected him and they lost their covenant with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They lost their... So you see how the prequel and the sequel come together like this. Now, okay? So this is really important. So in another hadith, okay, and this is the last thing that we're going to mention. Skip over some parts of it, but it talks about the kind of the scene of the war between Isa and Al-Dajjal, and this is narrated in Sahih al-Bukhari. I'm sorry, Sahih Muslim, not Sahih al-Bukhari, but it's an authentic hadith. And the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was talking about the Dajjal to such a detailed extent that the companions got scared. And the Prophet's like, "Why are you afraid?" And they say it's as if you're describing him like he's in our palm trees right now. Like you're so descriptive of him. And the Prophet says, "But I'm afraid of you from something else vis-a-vis the Dajjal." The Prophet says, "If he emerges while I'm here, I'll defend you." So he doesn't even know. The Prophet doesn't even know when he's going to come. He says, "If he comes while I'm here, I'll defend you." Right? But if he comes later, every soul for themselves. And then he begins to describe him with the characteristics that we talked about. One of his eyes looks like a smashed or floating grape, right? You know, he has curly hair. He's a young man. Those of you who live to this time should read the first verses of Surah Kahf, because that's going to protect you, right? And he's going to go left and right. He's going to travel throughout the earth. The 40 days, one day is going to be like a year, one day like a month, one day like a week, the rest like regular days, right? And so he's going to travel like rain backed by wind. He's going to cause rain to come down from the sky, crops to come out from the earth, right? He's going to pass by a land and say, "Bring out your treasures." And so whatever gold, diamond, silver exists in a land is just going to come out as he passes by it. Like he's going to have these kinds of miracles, right? And then there's going to come a scene, right? He's going to take a young man and he's going to cut him in half, right? And here's where the momentum changes now. He's going to take this young man, he's going to cut him in half, right? And then he's going to call him, and the young man is going to stand up smiling and laughing, right? But in another hadith, this reference, what happens here is that Allah resurrects this young man, right? Dajjal just acts like he's doing it, but the young man realizes it was Allah who resurrects him. And Dajjal says, "Don't you believe me now?" He says, "No, now I know you're a liar," right? And Dajjal tries to harm him and he can't. And it's like at this moment, the momentum of the war changes, right? And so then here's the sequel, right? At that moment, when that young man realizes, he cuts him in half, brings him back to life, but he realizes, "You're just a magician. Allah resurrected me. You're a liar." At that moment, God sends Jesus, the Son of Mary, from heaven. Now here's how he descends, right? He descends on the top of a white minaret at the east of Damascus. Pause. There are several ahadith that talk about where he descends, okay? Some of these have a problem, okay? Because some of them say he descends in Jordan. Some of them say he descends in Damascus. Some of them say he descends in Jerusalem, right? Likely, some of the companions mixed up the place, or later on, some of the narrators of the hadith, whether they were from Damascus or had a political tie to Jerusalem, might have changed the place, okay? But this is an authentic hadith, and it says that he's going to come to the east of Damascus, putting his hands on the wings of two angels. He's so handsome that when he bows his head, it looks like water is dropping. That's what it looks like. Like when he does this, it looks like water is falling. And when he lifts his head, his hair shines as if it were pearls, right? That's how he descends. So he descends like this. Any non-believer who receives his breath will die, and his breath reaches as far as his sight. He pursues the Dajjal. He finds him at the gate of Lod. What's the gate of Lod? The gate of Lod is in the city of Lod, which is like 9 miles from what is current day Tel Aviv, right? It's an old city in Palestine, right? And he kills the Dajjal there. In another hadith, it talks about how this happens. And Eesa alayhi salam simply approaches him, okay? And he doesn't kill him with a sword. He doesn't kill him with a knife or with a gun or something like that. Dajjal just sees him. And he begins to melt like salt in water. This is the exact terminology of the hadith, like salt in water. We're going to come back to what this means here in a second. I'm just going to finish the hadith, right? And then certain people who were saved from the trial, the Dajjal come to Jesus. He touches their face. He tells them about their place in paradise. So there's only a few people left on earth. And Jesus now is essentially saying, you made it. You did it. You survived, right? You're from Ahlul Jannah. He's given Bashar, like Bashar al-Mubashirin, right? And at that time, God reveals to Jesus, I have made some of my creatures, Ya'juj and Ma'juj, emerge out. This is the last sign before the coming of the hour. Now that's a whole different talk. That's referenced in Surah Kaf, also in another ayah in the Quran as well, right? Take my servants to the mountain of Tur so they can be safe, because Ya'juj and Ma'juj are now going to establish corruption all throughout the earth. In another hadith, Jesus alayhi salam is said that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said he's going to have some time to rule. And when he rules, okay, he's going to rule as a just king. He's going to do 3 things. Anyone know what the 3 things are? He's going to break the cross, kill the pig, and abolish what? Abolish the jizya, okay? Jizya is tax, all right? Which means that there's going to be, here's what that means. Break the cross, the Pauline version of Christianity, right? This idea that Jesus is God, he's a part of the Trinity, this thing that Jesus never himself taught, his companions never knew, never taught or anything like that, symbolized by the cross, Jesus is going to break that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَإِن مِّنْ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ إِلَّا لَيُؤْمِنَنَّ بِهِ قَبْلَ مَوْتِ. There's not a single person from Ahlul Kitab except that they're going to believe in Jesus as he really is before his death, right? Before the death, the actual death of Jesus, right? And so he's going to establish the true prophetic message that he came. He's not coming back as a prophet. He already took care of that. He comes back as a ruler, as a just king, because that's the other part of the Messiah role that we talked about, right? And kill the pig, part of what Pauline Christianity did is it abolished the Sharia that Jesus came to confirm. When Jesus says he's going to kill the pig, he's not just going to go kill some pig. Why would he do that, right? Like, you know, poor pig. Like he's not just going to go kill this for, okay? He's going to bring back the Sharia. So, like, you're not supposed to eat pork. Even if you're a Christian, you're not supposed to eat pork, right? He's going to bring that back. And he's going to establish so much justice on earth, there's not going to be a need for a jizya, right? So he's going to bring justice on earth, right? And he's going to rule like that for some time. He's eventually going to kill the Masih. And in some sense, that is the end of the prequel. I'll just say the way that he kills the Masih is sequel. The way he kills the Masih is very interesting because it talks about wars. No one's going to be able to kill him. No amount of weaponry, no plane, no gun, no grenade, nothing can destroy him. But one glance at Jesus and he melts. What does this mean? You see, the dunya can produce evil like there's no end, right? And sometimes even the strongest aspects of military might can't overcome that. Like your biceps, your strength, your power as a human being, it might not be enough to overcome evil. But there's one thing that can always overcome it, and that is true ikhlas. And that's what Jesus represents. True genuinity and sincerity and devotion to God. And if you have that, you can overcome any evil. قُلْ جَاءَ الْحَقِّ وَزَهَقَ الْبَاطِلِ إِنَّ الْبَاطِلَ كَانَ زَهُقًا أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله فاستغفروه إنه كان غفارا. We'll stop here. Yeah, questions, comments, disagreements, criticisms. I'll take it all. Yes, sister.
Can you talk a little bit about the Mahdi and how he comes in his chronology?
Yeah, I mean, the Mahdi is going to, there's a whole different set of ahadith like this. The ahadith that deal with the Mahdi are not as strong as the ahadith that talk about Masih al-Dajjal, right? And I think that needs to be a whole different talk. Like it can be, like, I can't summarize all of that in 45 minutes. But he's going to be from the lineage of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He's going to have a certain set of characteristics that people are going to recognize. He's going to lead the Muslim community. He's going to be a spiritual leader. He's going to be a political leader. And he's going to be like a khalifa. And the one thing that's really unique is all the Muslims are going to unite under him. Shia, Sunni, everyone, right? More details we need like a separate, kind of talk to kind of go into. Yeah.
So, my heard is on the day of judgment, everyone gets raised back from the dead. But but you said that there's going to be barely any people left on earth. How does that connect?
No, they're still in their graves. Like they're still people in earth. They're just not walking on earth. So the day of judgment, everyone is resurrected, right? They're resurrected from their graves, and they'll be resurrected as they were initially. Yeah. Yeah, sister.
So the description that's given for the Dajjal seems like his features are very obvious.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
fine, short, the way he walks. Is that all like literal or like literally would he be like that, or is it all metaphor?
No, I think the way those descriptions are given in the ahadith, they're clearly literal, right? And in the Arabic language, those particular descriptions, they don't have metaphorical connotations at all, right? So there's no reason to look at them from a metaphorical point of view. Yeah. And in general, like in usul tafsir or like interpretation, you always start literal unless there's a reason for something like a qarina, like there's something to take you from literal to metaphorical. There's no reason to go from literal to metaphorical with those descriptions. Yeah, this brother right here.
If Dajjal is a creation of Allah, then why doesn't Allah stop him from saying he's
It's a very good question. This is a deep philosophical question, right? I don't think I have an answer for you. Did anyone hear his question? So he says, if Dajjal is a creation of Allah, okay, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is God and he's all powerful, and Dajjal is going to claim that he's God, why doesn't God just stop him from saying that he's God, right? Allahu alam. The answer is, I don't know. Allah is wise and he has his wisdom. But you want help? You want help out? Okay. Yeah. So it's a test. Yeah, it's a test, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to separate the true believers, right, from those who are hypocrites vis-a-vis this test. But ultimately, the wisdom behind that, Allahu a'lam. I don't know. Yeah, sister over here. Yes, there will be Jews, there will be Christians, there will be Muslims, there will be people of other faiths as well, there will be atheists. And the predominant opinion, such as Ibn Abbas's opinion, Abu Huraira says this specifically, some other commentators said this specifically. In the Quran, it says, وَإِن مِّنْ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ Ahl al-Kitab, could mean Jews, Christians, or both, either or. إِلَّا لَا يُؤْمِنَنْ There's tawqid here, okay, like emphasis. There's not going to be a single person from Ahlul Kitab when he comes, except that they will believe in him before his death. Okay? So essentially, when he breaks the cross, I do think that's metaphorical. Maybe both, maybe literal and metaphorical. Maybe he'll break a cross literally and metaphorically. He's breaking the Pauline conception of what Jesus is, which is totally different from what he taught. And when he does that, and people see that he's praying behind the Mahdi, the Ahlul Kitab will follow him and believe in him. Let's do maybe like 2 more questions. Yeah. How he gets his powers? No, there's no hadith in like how he gets his powers. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala endows him with a few specific abilities, like controlling the weather, okay? Or some forms of trickery. For the most part though, what Dajjal is doing is he's utilizing jinn and shayateen to do tricks for him. So a lot of what he does is just trickery. It's just magic. But some of the things Allah just endows him with. Last question. There's a hand up here. Yeah. That's a good question. Is Dajjal his real name or a made-up time? I don't think it's his real name, because I don't think he would call himself the tricker. You know, I don't think he'd get many followers that way. He's gonna call himself Masih. So that's the title he's gonna kind of attach to himself, and he's gonna bring that to Bani Israel before anyone else, because that Bani Israel is looking for that. But what his actual name is and what his parents' names are, I don't know. Yeah, I don't think that's mentioned. Okay, so let's stop here. Jazakumullahu khair. Thank you. I mean, it's been like over an hour, so I can't, like, I know it's difficult to sit in a lecture for that long. So barakallahu feekum. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us a better understanding of this. اللهم انفعنا بما قرأنا وجعلنا من الذين يستمعون القول فيتبعون أحسنه والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. جزاكم الله خير.
Jazakallah khair, Dr. Kia, for sharing this beneficial information about Eesa ibn Maryam and Al-Dajjal, and may Allah protect all of us from the fitna of Al-Dajjal. I want to thank all of you for coming out and thank MCCL for helping us put this program together. And don't forget to follow us on social media and online to follow us for other updates and other events, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, brother. Doctor, for your I've heard of the service. Jazakallah khair. Hopefully we're going to see you more.